Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Learning Continuum, Sustainability and Climate Change, Why We Need to Care. I'll pass things over to Lorraine Carter, Director for McMaster Continuing Education.
Good evening and welcome. As Jennifer has indicated, my name is Lorraine Carter, and I'm the Director of McMaster Continuing Education. It's my particular pleasure to welcome you to the second session in a series that's called the Learning Continuum. This evening's session is a co-hosted situation by McMaster Continuing Education and the Center for Climate Change at McMaster University. The session that you have joined is called Sustainability and Climate Change, Why We Need to Care. I'd like to begin, and I think it's pretty important that we do this, to acknowledge the land on which we reside. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. The persons who are going to be presenting this evening, you've met Jennifer. Jennifer is our master organizer, and you know who I am now. Today, I'm delighted to be able to share this opportunity with Dr. Altaf Arain, who is Director of McMaster's Center for Climate Change. And also joining us are two of his PhD students. We have Tariq Dean and we have Daniel Mutton. Both Tariq and Daniel have been major contributors to the presentation, and I understand there's been some input from some other colleagues and friends, but it is going to be Daniel who's going to be our speaker this evening. So at this particular point, I would like things to move forward to Altaf. So Altaf, if you'd be kind enough to take the virtual floor, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Lauren, and I really appreciate this opportunity that you have provided us to be here and make this presentation. I would like to say that sustainability is very important for the health and the future of our environment and the planet itself. So we cannot control the climate, we cannot mitigate the climate until unless we are serious about sustainability on all fronts, on all aspects. We need sustainable environment, sustainable living. So this is a very important topic. Our team has put a good effort to present this information to you. So I would like to introduce here Daniel Mutton and Tariq Dean. These two are the main contributors, but there are other students you will see on the slide. They have also contributed. Daniel Mutton is working on hydrologic modeling, exploring the climate change impacts on different watersheds across Canada and how the climate will change. It's very relevant research. And Tariq Dean is exploring the impacts of climate change on a Six Nations area near the Hamilton. So they are very knowledgeable scientists, emerging young scientists. So welcome, Daniel. So floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Altaf. I'll begin sharing the presentation now. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on sustainability and climate change. My name is Daniel Mutton. As Dr. Arain said, I'm a PhD student in Earth and Environmental Science at McMaster University with the McMaster Center for Climate Change, and I'll be your speaker this evening. Before we begin, I wanted to thank my fellow students who contributed to the creation of the materials being presented today, including Tariq Dean, Nur Hussain, Elizabeth Ruda, and Navpreet Flora, as well as Dr. Arain himself. So we'll begin by briefly going over an outline of the material being discussed today. We'll start by defining what sustainability is and the UN goals for sustainability established in 2016. We'll then establish the global context for sustainability, discussing climate change, how it occurs, and its impact both globally and to Canada. We'll then talk about sustainable land management, sustainable energy technologies and energy use, sustainable agriculture, and how to create a sustainable city. The image on the right shows the typical representation of the three interdependent pillars of sustainability. Environmental sustainability, meaning maintaining ecological integrity, keeping the Earth's environmental systems in balance, while natural resources are consumed by humans at a rate where they are able to replenish themselves. Economic sustainability, maintaining practices that support long-term economic growth without negatively impacting social, environmental, and cultural aspects of the community. And social sustainability, maintaining designs of the physical realm, which are interconnected with designs of the social world that promote well-being through the use of infrastructure to support social and cultural life, social amenities, systems for citizen engagement, and space for people and places to evolve. The definition of sustainability we'll be using throughout the presentation is the UN definition of sustainability, first defined in 1987 by the UN Brundtland Commission. Sustainability is defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is important to define because this definition of sustainability is not only rooted in environmentalism, but also in economics. Published in 2016, the Sustainable Development Goals are a blueprint for fighting climate change and achieving a more just society. There are 17 development goals with 169 associated targets to be met over the next 15 years. These goals also take into account regional and sub-regional dimensions and recognize that each country faces specific challenges in pursuit of sustainable development. The Sustainable Development Goals recognize that sustainable urban development and management are critical to the quality of life for people, and that sustainable and economic development depend on the sustainable management of Earth's natural resources, such as such, specific attention is given to conserving and managing the remaining natural resources and combating the effects of climate change that threaten them. Climate change is the long-term shift in global weather events and temperature. Essentially, it's the result of more energy being trapped within the system that's Earth. Climate change can be both naturally occurring or anthropogenically induced, and it's the latter that we're going to be focused on because it's what's currently happening. Anthropogenic climate change happens from the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels include chemicals such as carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane, and they're important because they trap radiation within the atmosphere, warming the Earth. This is possible because of the physical properties of greenhouse gases. The sun radiates across the electromagnetic spectrum, but the primary source of radiation is shortwave radiation in the visible, ultraviolet, and near-infrared wavelengths. For energy in these wavelengths, all gases in the atmosphere are almost completely transparent, allowing the radiation to pass through the atmosphere and interact with the Earth. The radiation that leaves the Earth, however, is long-wave radiation. At these wavelengths, the greenhouse gases are mostly opaque, and they absorb the radiation and re-radiate the absorbed heat back to Earth, which causes the warming effect. Climate change is also a positive feedback loop, meaning that changes in one direction cause further changes in the same direction. This can be imagined as the cartoon snowball rolling down the hill, only to become larger and larger and larger as it rolls. An example of one such loop within climate change is with the melting of permanent ice and snow coverage. Ice and snow have a high albedo, meaning that they reflect radiation efficiently, preventing the Earth from absorbing the shortwave radiation and releasing longwave radiation. However, as the Earth warms, the ice coverage decreases and the overall albedo of the Earth lowers, causing it to absorb more incoming shortwave radiation and the heating effect to increase at a more rapid pace. The figure on the right is a simplified diagram showing the Earth's greenhouse effect in action. Now that we've established some of the background into what climate change is, let's mention some of the effects of climate change to Canada specifically. So climate change will impact the world and Canada differently depending on the exact location. Across Canada, there will be shorter, warmer winters and longer, more extreme summers. The rising sea level will also cause coastal flooding and an increased rate of storm surges along the coasts. In central Canada, warmer, drier temperatures will increase the risk of drought and wildfire. Additionally, the cryosphere is one of the most sensitive regions to climate change, will experience some of the earlier and more profound effects. High latitude regions are projected to experience warming more rapid than the global average. Additionally, the warming will cause shorter winters and a retreat of permanent ice and snow coverage, as well as the thawing of permafrost, which will devastate the northern biosphere and shift regional geomorphology. Landscape-wide changes are already beginning to occur as tundras are beginning to turn into grass and shrubland. The figure on the right shows the change in fire occurrence predicted by the Canadian GCM, a climate model developed and used by Environment and Climate Change Canada with the purpose of predicting the effects under different future climate scenarios. As seen in the figure, rates of wildfire ignition by both lightning and human activity are predicted to increase across Canada, specifically in central, northern, and western Canada. The next section we'll be talking about will be sustainable land management. The concept of sustainable land management offers solutions that go beyond just changes in technology regarding aspects of land use and emphasis on social participation and policy dialogue. It's defined as a system of technologies and planning that aims to integrate ecological with socioeconomic and political principles in the management of land to achieve intergenerational equality. Land degradation is a central challenge for sustainable development. At a global scale, key problems in the form of soil degradation, availability of water, and loss of biodiversity occur in all the sociological and economic contexts worldwide. Problems with land degradation affect the following natural resources around the world. Soils, about 1/3 of the world's agricultural land has been damaged, mostly by soil loss caused by erosion. Water, problems of quality and quantity, as well as spatial and temporal interdependence. Natural vegetation, problems with quality, quantity, and biodiversity. Wildlife, problems of protected areas, wildlife corridors, and poaching. Natural resources can be used in a sustainable way if the appropriate land management technologies, planning, and policy frameworks are implemented in a way to complement one another in accordance with the principles of sustainability. The figure on the right shows that across major cities in Canada, only 3 cities have been moving towards higher density housing in recent decades. These cities include Toronto, Victoria, and Vancouver. So what are these principles of sustainable land management? There are 4 principles of sustainable land management that we'll be talking about. The first is targeted policy and institutional support, including the development of incentive mechanisms for sustainable land management adoption and income generation at the local level. The second is land user driven and participatory approaches. The third is the integrated use of natural resources on farms and at the ecosystem scale. And the fourth is multi-stakeholder involvement and partnership at all levels. These principles establish the foundation for how one should critically examine the land use system and interaction between natural resources, climate, and human needs to determine whether the land management is sustainable or not, with the purpose of minimizing land degradation and rehabilitating already degraded land. The figure on the left is a schematic showing this relationship. This system is intended both to examine both the natural and economic factors that contribute to land degradation and utilize the land in a way to alleviate both stresses. Over the course of 40 years, land use in Hamilton has been geared heavily towards cropland, resulting in a decrease in deciduous, coniferous, and mixed forests. Lots of land has been built into infrastructure, and one of the largest trends is that rather than having a combined building of both business and housing, and structuring the city to have everything within walking radius. Industrialization has led to rapid expansion of separate business from residences and the establishment of highways and major roads for car travel. The figure on the left shows a comparison of Hamilton in 1979 or 1879 and 2020, showing the large-scale urbanization that has occurred in the area. The figure on the right shows the change in land cover type in the Hamilton municipality over the same period, showing an increase in farmland and built up or urban setting, and decreases in forest, wetlands, and grasslands across all species types. With what we've discussed about sustainable land management in mind, here there are some best practices that have either been accepted as standard for sustainable land management or are becoming the accepted standard around the world. These best practices include, but are not limited to, trending away from suburbs and towards higher density urban areas, preserving agricultural land and increasing efficiency rather than total dedicated surface area, and moving away from industrialized agriculture, which will be discussed in greater detail later, trending away from cars and promoting a larger variety of established public transportation options, increasing the efficiency of insulation and moving towards low emission heating and transportation options, conserve and update existing infrastructure and architecture whenever possible, preserving, reclaiming, and restoring natural areas already suffering from land degradation or in danger of degrading. The figure on the right is the Engineering Technology Building on the McMaster campus. This is a LEED Gold certified building. LEED certification is a sustainability measurement that works on a credit basis where a construction project earns credits through sustainable design, performance, and construction methods, gold being the second highest rank of certification after platinum. The energy choice we make in the near future is among the most important of any choice in human history. While energy choice and development may broadly appear as the technological and economic question, there are other considerations. Sustainability and the energy choices we make reflect our priorities as a society and our attitude towards future generations. The transition to renewable energy is not only feasible, but it's necessary to ensure the needs of these future generations. When discussing sustainable energy, it's important to keep some things in mind. Like many tech markets, the field of sustainable energy is rapidly evolving. Prices have steadily dropped since the 1990s and earlier, and designs are rapidly changing to become more efficient. Additionally, there exists a complex interrelated web between politics, economics, and social systems, and support from all systems are needed for a major energy transition to occur, as obstacles from one sector can actively impede progress. Finally, there is a historic precedent for a major energy transition, as the United States of America, in its relatively short history, has already made 2 such transitions in its lifetime. Before the Civil War, American industry depended on wood, wind, water, and animals for its energy and power. The advent of the Industrial Revolution outstripped the wood supply from easily accessible forests and contributed to the first energy transition, as coal became the major supply for US energy needs until the 1940s. This second transition was not due to shortages in coal, but due to the relative advantages of oil and gas, such as providing vast improvements in air quality within cities. In the 1960s, it was thought that a third transition would occur from oil and gas to nuclear energy. However, concerns about nuclear safety caused public opposition and derailed new nuclear power developments. The figure on the right shows these energy transitions over time. The graphic predicts into the future up until 2030, which is where the renewable high and low split comes in. The two represent the high and low estimation for the percentage share of renewable energy in the future. The sustainable energy systems we'll be discussing today include photovoltaic energy, wind power systems, geothermal energy, and tidal energy. Since the need for sustainable energy sources was first presented with urgency, photovoltaic or solar energy has been proposed as one of the keystone technologies. Photovoltaic cells were first created in the 1950s and first saw use by the aerospace industry in the 1960s as a means to provide power to spacecraft and satellite. In the decades since, photovoltaic cells have gotten more efficient and cheaper, with the modern global capacity surpassing 505 gigawatts. And while exact costs vary by manufacturer and location, the price has dropped significantly. For reference, the total Canadian energy use is roughly 195 gigawatts. Photovoltaic cells function by converting the incoming energy from the sun into electricity. When light strikes the solar cell, it knocks electrons loose from the atoms in the semiconductor material. Electrons are then captured in the conductor and form an electrical current, producing electricity. There are three main types of photovoltaic systems. Rather than competing between each other, each system has its own application. The first is for large-scale photovoltaic farms designed to collect power and feed it into the utility grid, such as the power plant outside of Sarnia. The second is a standalone system that's used to charge batteries. And the third is a system used to directly power appliances. On the right, you can see the total photovoltaic energy produced, broken down by region, and its evolution over time, as well as the breakdown of the market share in the development of photovoltaic systems and its evolution over time. Canada has significant solar potential that so far remains mostly untapped. In 2016, China became the world's leading country in terms of cumulative installed capacity with 43.5 gigawatts, followed by Germany with 39.7, Japan with 34.4, and the US with 25.6. Canada is much lower with only 2 gigawatts. Even St. John's, the capital of Newfoundland and Labrador, with the lowest amount of solar resources of all major Canadian cities, has more solar potential than major cities like Beijing, Berlin, London, or Tokyo. The figure on the left shows both Canadian total installed photovoltaic capacity compared to similar countries, and compares major Canadian cities' possible photovoltaic potential compared to other major cities around the world. The image on the right shows the photovoltaic potential across Canada, with warmer colors relating to geographic regions with greater photovoltaic potential, and cooler colors meaning less potential. Canada isn't lacking the solar potential to make photovoltaic energy a significant source of the total energy generated within the country. What it is lacking is supporting policy and direct methods, including research and development and investment support to develop the infrastructure. Wind turbines are one of the oldest forms of power generation in human history, with windmills having been used for hundreds of years and wind being harnessed for thousands of years. Put simply, wind turbines use wind to make electricity. The wind turns the blade and the turbine around a rotor, which spins a generator, creating electricity. The image on the top right shows the global cumulative installed capacity for wind power. Offshore wind has also begun to receive greater attention in Canada after its success in maritime Europe and Eastern Asia. International development of offshore wind has resulted in a commercially competitive market, causing prices to drop in recent years. Canada, by virtue of its long coastline and great number of lakes, has a lot of area for offshore wind power plants to be developed. The regions with the greatest energy potential are Atlantic Canada, the St. Lawrence, Hudson's Bay, and the Davis Strait. The figure on the bottom right shows the total cumulative capacity for offshore wind power by the end of 2017, with the blue bar indicating capacity installed in the final year the data was available. Geothermal energy is the energy contained in the Earth's interior as heat. Geothermal energy as steam and hot water has been used for decades, both for heating and more general purpose energy generation. Geothermal energy is geographically specific and only accounts for less than 1% of the world's energy production. However, in developing countries where total installed electric capacity is growing, or in countries with high geothermal potential, a significant percentage of their total power comes from geothermal. Within Canada, over 110,000 geothermal heat pumps have been installed since 1990, with 60% of this capacity being for residential units. Shallow geothermal resources are heavily concentrated in southern Ontario and Quebec, but are available throughout the country. The figure on the upper left shows the distribution of these 110,000 geothermal heat pumps across Canada. The figure on the lower left shows the increase of geothermal capacity over the decades, the blue rhombus, compared to the total produced electricity, the purple squares. Tidal energy is a form of marine or hydro energy that converts energy from the changing tides. Tidal energy generators come in many forms, from semi-submerged, floating, rotating, or anchored platforms. Tidal energy began commercial development in the 1970s, and because of infrastructural challenges, is only now beginning to reach commercial maturity, although location-specific implementational challenges still exist. Tidal energy is of particular interest to Canada for a few different reasons. The first is that Canada has long populated coastlines to establish tidal energy plants. The second is that Canada has specific areas of extreme tidal currents. For example, Hudson Bay and the Bay of Fundy specifically is capable of supplying 2% of Canada's current energy needs and the entire energy needs of Nova Scotia. The figure on the right shows the potential energy density in kilowatts per meter squared in the Minas Passage of the Bay of Fundy during ebb and flood. The next topic that we'll be discussing is sustainable agriculture. Agriculture is both a major cause of the current environmental crisis and affected by the current environmental crisis. Sustainable agriculture arises from the intersection of these two issues and seeks to find a shared solution, effectively providing for human well-being and for biodiversity. It's widely recognized that in already hot or arid regions, global warming poses a serious threat to agriculture. These areas are expected to become hotter and drier, putting strains on global food production. An increased global demand for meat and dairy in the developing world has put further strain on agriculture, as intensive livestock rearing is particularly inefficient for cropland use and is a serious source of water pollution. A more sustainable organic-based agriculture utilizing no-till agriculture, conservation methods, and cover crops could become a major carbon sink, as well as increasing regional resistance to drought and erosion. Additionally, a reorganization of farm plots can be done to revitalize biodiversity without impacting farm yield, and a shift away from chemical pesticides can be done to help preserve soil and water quality. The figure on the right shows the breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions from various sectors, with the agriculture, purple, being the fourth largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions after energy supply, industry, and forestry. Within Canada, only 5% of our surface area is suited for agriculture. Much of the land is under threat from urbanization and soil degradation. The main cause of soil degradation of Canada's agricultural soil is the unsustainable farming practices that came with the move from small and medium-scale farms into large industrialized farms growing monocultures. The image on the screen shows the agricultural areas of Canada. Remember that when viewing an image, because of the minimum line thickness relative to the total size of the image, it over-represents the total agricultural space in Canada. For example, not all of Southern Ontario is agriculturally viable, despite what the map is showing. Within Canada, sustainable agricultural practices are being implemented both as a response to public demand to reduce pollution and in order to preserve soil quality. Over the past 30 years, the Science Council of Canada, the Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture, Fisheries, and Forestry, federal and provincial departments of agriculture, as well as university and non-government research groups have reported concerns on soil degradation in Canada. Soil health in this case is defined as the soil's ability to support crop growth without harming the environment and is generally dependent on soil organic matter, chemical concentrations within soil, soil structure, erosion, chemical contamination, salination, and groundwater contamination. In addition to soil degradation, other impacts of non-sustainable agriculture include water pollution, loss of biodiversity, and the destruction of surrounding ecosystems. As sediments, nutrients, and pesticides run off from agricultural soil or are eroded, they end up in the water supply. The presence of these substances makes the water unfit for wildlife and unusable by humans without significant treatment. Agriculture is also one of the largest biodiversity losses, as it impacts species in several ways. including the destruction of natural habitat for the creation of farmland and ranches, establishing monocultures, release of pollutants, and other associated value chain impacts. Solutions to address the loss of biodiversity can be broadly categorized into land sparing, which is setting aside large areas of land for conservation, and land sharing, which is reorganizing agricultural land to maximize biodiversity without affecting yield. Since the 1990s, Canada and Canadian farmers have been taking steps to move towards a more sustainable form of agriculture. Many farmers today work alongside scientists and reorganize their fields according to land sharing principles. And social movements fighting against chemical pesticides and industrialized farming practices, while accepting an increase in food prices, have allowed small and medium scale farmers to maintain their livelihood and practice sustainable forms of agriculture. The image on the right of this page is, truthfully, a bit of a mess. What it's showing is the effects of species loss on primary production, where the data is synthesized from 62 studies. The thick red line shows lower productivity as species richness decreases. The thin red line shows the inverse of the thick red line to allow a comparison of effect magnitudes within environmental changes with positive effects. The right axis shows the effects of other environmental change that come alongside the changes in biodiversity. Blue is for increases and red is for decreases in productivity. The final topic we'll be discussing is sustainable cities and communities. This was left for the end as it serves as a synthesis for the other three topics previously discussed, as the creation of sustainable community involves sustainable land management schemes, the implementation of sustainable energy technology, and a reliance on sustainable agriculture. A sustainable community will be heavily influenced by the sustainability of certain local parameters, including energy generation, natural resource availability, and environmental health, and the economic and social needs of the community. A sustainable city, therefore, seeks to address many of the challenges that face urban living, such as access to affordable energy, public health, housing and transportation, and local poverty. The challenges with creating a sustainable city are twofold. The first is a challenge of vision. What should a sustainable city look like? And the second is a challenge of change. How do we bring about a sustainable city? Addressing these challenges is complex. The vision of what makes a sustainable city will vary depending on location. Many people have a genuine, if diverse, view on what a sustainable city might become, and the pathways to change must come through cooperation and coherence of purpose. When it comes to change in making the sustainable city, three things must be done. Passive conservation strategies are strategies that are implemented during the planning and creation of a building or infrastructure that are designed to passively benefit sustainability. For example, this could be implementing the concept of a 15-minute city, an urban planning design where a person can find all necessities within 15 minutes of walking. Active conservation strategies differ as systems need to be tweaked and maintained in order to keep efficiency. For example, public transit systems that have the capability to ramp up or ramp down according to need, for example, around a school year. Finally, citizens need to modify their behavior by, for example, taking public transit, walking, or biking for travel instead of commuting via car whenever possible. Next, we'll discuss a local case study, the McMaster Innovation Park. The park began its construction in 2005, with the City of Hamilton and the Province of Ontario contributing funding to its development. The park was built with the goal of enabling researchers to work with industry and government in a central shared location, benefiting each other further by allowing stakeholders to perform partnerships and capitalize on the economic value of the research being done. The first building was completed and welcomed its tenants in April of 2009. The park is notable in a discussion around sustainability because of the numerous sustainability awards it has received over its 12-year life, both in sustainable design and operation. Some of the interesting features of the Innovation Park include geothermal heating via the District Energy System, or the DES. The DES is a low-carbon thermal energy system that connects multiple buildings in an area or neighborhood. The system consists of both a heating and a cooling center and connect to the building via a network of thermal pipes. Other than the Innovation Park, both the University of Toronto and York University use a DES, and the City of Toronto has identified the DES model as, quote, a key component of Toronto's climate action plan to reduce emissions from buildings and help the city reach its greenhouse gas target of net zero in 2050 or sooner. Some other sustainable design choices employed by the Innovation Park include triple glazed argon-filled windows and upgraded curtains to reduce energy loss, exterior continuous insulation along all outer opaque walls for the same reason, with both of these examples being of passive strategies. Electronically commutated EC motors for all pumps and fans, and improved ventilation distribution effectiveness using displacement ventilation, with these examples being of active strategies. Taking what we learned about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and applying it to the topics we've went over, here's what we as a community can do in order to effectively move towards sustainability. Technological expansion would evolve around implementing alternative generation methods for wind, solar, geothermal, and others. This includes at an individual level, installing solar or geothermal generation where appropriate, and at a national level, increasing investment in sustainable energy generation, storage, and distribution technologies to replace coal and oil and gas generation. Transportation. To address the long travel distances, new communities should follow the notion of a compact community, which aims to localize residential areas between common use facilities to reduce travel distances. Additionally, older communities can be renovated over time when appropriate. Replacing or augmenting car travel with more extensive public transportation and moving away from gas-burning cars to electric or possibly hydrogen vehicles is also beneficial. Infrastructure. Sustainable urban design, for example, in the form of the compact 15-minute city previously mentioned, should be utilized when planning infrastructure renovations or additions. Thank you all for attending the talk. I hope you learned something about sustainability today, whether it be about sustainability goals and development, sustainable technologies, or the current role of sustainability in Canada. Additionally, I encourage the audience to critically examine their behaviors and actions to see how they can act in a more sustainable manner. And so I leave you with this question. That concludes my presentation.
So thanks so much, Daniel. I've certainly learned a lot. I've known pieces of this, but you've done a very cohesive job in presenting a complex question that we really do need to be thinking about. The idea that I'd like to be encouraged to think that Canada will advance, say, in its solar energy. But there are other examples from your talk as well that we could say, you know, how much confidence do we have that we will move forward? I realize that's more of a political and a policy question, but I'd just be interested if you had any thoughts on that. Like, are we making progress?
I think we are making progress. The question more is, are we making progress at a rapid enough rate, I guess? And other countries other than Canada are progressing more rapidly. And so we can look to these other countries like South Korea or like Germany for inspiration for how we can move forward ourselves, while also recognizing that Canada is relatively unique, specifically in the sense that we're so large and our population centers are so spread out that we have challenges that other countries don't necessarily have.
Right. So there are challenges because of the distance, but there's also, if I've understood correctly, also advantages given our coastlines and so forth. So it's how to get those things to work together and to move forward. But I'm happy to hear that there are some really solid examples out there of countries that are moving ahead, and with, you know, second sober thought around all of this, perhaps Canada will be able to keep progressing in a positive way. And I feel more hopeful than I did 10 minutes ago, and I'm very grateful to LTAF and to you, Daniel, to be able to articulate that it's not a panacea, it's not perfect, but we do seem to be making some changes, and that it's holistic, that we need to be thinking. I took that in terms of your remarks, LTAF, so thank you. I did want to share that McMaster Continuing Education has a short sustainability program. It's a series of 3 short courses that would revisit some of the ideas that you've heard about tonight. If you are at all interested, we would love to hear from you. That's not a big sales pitch. It's just something that we believe in. Therefore, we do have an opportunity to put out a program with a sustainability focus. So sincere thanks to the presenters. I know, Daniel, you did a power of work, but so too did your colleagues to bring together this great information, and with the support, coaching, and mentoring of LTAF. So thanks so much. It's been a very good evening.